Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. We have several important reports to consider this morning, and I anticipate we will deal with them in our usual efficient manner. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing through our Council's website. Can I remind you of a few of the arrangements in the guidance note? Microphones should be muted and switched off when not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function, and I'll invite you to speak in order. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join. This is required to allow us to record member presence. I would also advise members that we have a late report which was circulated to committee members last week following consideration at Social Work Services Committee on the 7th of June. I've agreed for us to take this item of business as relate to urgent items and reflect very important aspects of support for the most vulnerable people in the region and due to the impact of the COVID pandemic. Item number 1 is surrounding apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Nick, can I ask you to provide the surrounding and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've received no apologies in advance of the meeting. All members are present on Teams at the start of the meeting, with the exception of Councillor Giusti, Councillor Ronnie, and Councillor Sloan. Okay, thank you, and I agree to members' remote participation. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? I don't see anybody. So we'll move on to item number 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting on the 13th of April 2021. Is the committee happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of April? Agreed. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, which is developing the Dumfries and Galloway annual governance statement for 2021. This report seeks the committee's recommendations on issues for inclusion in the annual governance statements for 2020-21. We are referred to paragraph 3.14 in particular for consideration of matters we wish to include in the annual governance statement. Nick Evans is here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open it up to member debate. Is there any members who wish to come in? Doesn't appear so. Oh, sorry, Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I think the items at 3.14 are the most important things this year. I know the review, the first one, has been a big piece of work that we've done, so I think that should be included in, and the other 2 are important as well, and they're maybe not as been as big a piece of work, but they're a valued piece of work, so I would say those should be included.
Okay, thank you much for that. I've got no other members wishing to come in, so I'll move to the recommendations. I think Ivor's just commented on the annual governance statement, and are we happy to make recommendations for issues to be included, drawing on the Directorate's actions in paragraphs 3.7 and 3.14. Agreed. Thank you. Item number 5 is the Transformation Programme update. This report provides us with an update on the overall progress of the work programmes developed following the transformation events and the agreed transformation themes. Mike Shepley and Heather Carnacan are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open it up to member debate. Is there any members who wish to come in? Malcolm?
Thanks, Chair. It was just a small, maybe slightly pedantic point. It was page 62. It mentions the office accommodation strategy was reported to the E&R committee on Tuesday. Well, I know it was a kind of long day, but I don't remember this policy being reported to the E&R committee on the 15th.
Mike?
Yeah, sorry. Which I'm looking at the papers now. Which point is that? Sorry, councillor.
Did you say
page 62, item 310.1 mentions that the office accommodation policy was reported. I don't remember that being reported. There was a home working policy reported, not an office accommodation policy.
Chair, can I come in to assist?
Yep.
Chair, that report was due at ENR committee. It will be brought in August for the extra ENR committee, given the size of the agenda. So it was scheduled and it wasn't considered on the agenda for the ENR committee on Tuesday. So Councillor Johnston's correct in that, but it will be considered at the meeting in August.
That's okay. Good. I kind of thought I was maybe losing it a bit because it was a long day.
Congratulations for surviving that long committee. Is any other members who wish to come in on this agenda item? Nope. I'll move to the recommendations then. Are we happy to consider recommendations 1, 2, and... Oh, sorry, Ronnie.
Just another, I suppose, pedantic point is that in that report, I don't know, it's just me and age related. I can't read that. I think I can't even tell what page it is. Is it 67? It's that small print. I can't even read it.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just getting to that page, Ronnie.
I think it's 67. I can't read the number either.
Yeah, page 67. The print is relatively small. We could maybe email that appendix out to members after this meeting.
There was a bigger paper sent out, but the print's no much bigger. I quite agree with what Ronnie's saying.
Anyway, but I think further on in the reports, there are other reports similar to this, and they have got a decent sized print that people can read.
We'll deal with that offline from this and send back out as requested.
Okay, thank you. So moving to the recommendations, are we happy to consider and agree recommendations 1, 2 and 3 on block? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Item number 6 is the Council Revenue Budget Outturn Report for 2020-21. And we are provided with an overview of the Council's financial performance and final position for the year end 31st of March 2021. And importantly, include an update on the main financial implications associated with the COVID pandemic. The report also updates us of the year-end balances and committed funds, as well as an update on achievement of agreed savings during 2020-21. Gillian Ross and Paul Garrett are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will now open it up to member debate. Any members who wish to come in? Ivor?
Chair, actually, if you don't understand what happened last year, you'd think, oh, we've had a good year and we've underspent and we've got all this money. I think that's something the public need to know. This is actually money we're carrying forward from last year that the government gave to us late in the year to address issues last year and this year coming. I think we've worked as well as we can within the budget we had last year, and we've got that money to look at the pressures that will be identified this year. I think that's just one of the things we need to flag up to the public. They'll be thinking that we're not spending our resources, or we're one of the ones where we're stockpiling money, but we're not. This is just money that we've carried forward. So I think we should let the public know that.
Yeah, no, absolutely fair point. And of course, this, an outturn report is a snapshot on the 31st of March. Some of that money has been spent due to decisions of this committee and implications of the COVID pandemic. And of course, we've got further reports on our agenda later on to consider that even further. So I think that is a point that's worth making. And of course, some of that money has already been used for a number of grants, etc., which has been greatly received by the public as well. Any other members wishing to come in on this report? No. Okay, are we happy to note recommendations 1 to 5 on block? I'll take that as a yes.
Agreed.
Item number 7 is the Corporate Capital Investment Strategy Final Outturn Report. We are presented with the outturn position across the Council's capital investment strategy for the financial year 2020-21, which reflects the utilisation of 81% of the agreed funding available, which I think is good given the disruption faced by the construction industry, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, but for much of last financial year. We're also updated on the level of capital receipts generated during the year. Paul Garrett is here to assist members with any questions, and we'll open it up to member debate. Is there any members who wish to come in on this report? Nope. I will move to the recommendations then. Are we happy to note recommendations 1 to 3 on block?
Agreed.
Yeah, great, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 8, which is the Council Disposal and Acquisition Policy Update. Following our decision to carry out a review of the existing disposal and acquisitions policy, officers have conducted a piece of work to review and research this in consultation with political groups. The outcome of the research and consultation is presented to members today in this report for our consideration. Colin Freeman and Alistair Johnson are here to ask if members have any questions, and I will now open it up to member debate. Is there any members who wish to come in on this report? Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, we've been looking forward to this item for some time, and it's good to see it here in front of us. I'm just sort of thinking maybe we should actually see any detail coming back to us, especially regarding the more detailed sort of aspects of the process for disposals and acquisitions. So, I mean, I don't know if the officers want to speak to that at the moment, because obviously we can't see it all in front of us, but if that's something we could get back to a future committee.
Don't see why not. Alice, would you want to give a brief update on that part of the recommendation?
Yes, I think in the report we did say that we were developing a process and with procedures and flowcharts. Yes, that work is actually fairly well advanced now, so we're sort of fairly clear on that. However, it wasn't considered to be appropriate to present it as part of this report, but if members so wish, we can certainly present it at a future or the next meeting.
Okay. Can I come back on that, Chair, please? So, well, I mean, I'll listen to what other members have to say, but just maybe that would be helpful, and I think maybe we can get a form of words maybe that just captures that as part of the recommendations.
That's fine. Okay. Yeah, we can come back to that. The recommendations. Jane.
Thanks. I think in light of the very considerable public interest in new assets and disposal of council land, and particularly with respect to common good, I was wondering how this was going to be shown to the public. It's not absolutely clear, if I look on the website, where the council, where the public looks to see how this is actually managed. So I'd like to make certain that is properly flagged up. And the other thing, I'd hugely peg, Adam, forgive me, but because of the issue with respect to common good, I was also wondering whether we could push along the common good registers, which are still of great interest. How we do with that.
Okay, Alistair and Colin, do you want to come in on that point?
We can certainly, and I think we can publish the agreed disposal policy on the council's website. I believe it is already, but sorry, I haven't had the chance to double check that. We're also in the process currently with working closely with legal services on reviewing the register of common good assets. It's a work in progress that's nearing completion, and we are giving serious consideration at the moment to how that should be published and on the website. There's guidance in a guidance note that attaches to the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015 that states how, in what form the Common Good Register should be published. So we're sort of getting towards revising that and publishing a sort of a new revised format of a public of a Common Good Register on the website as we speak. There's a few more assets and areas that we're sort of reviewing at the moment. Legal services have been working their way through all the various former boroughs in the region. There's one or two more just to get finished off, and then we'll be in a position to say publish a revised register of common good assets.
Yeah, Colin, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of making information available, we can certainly embed any hyperlinks to common good registers, guidance, etc., in the policy once it's agreed, just so it's all the information is fully accessible to both members, officers, and indeed the public.
Okay, Jane, I think on your sugary peg, you've got quite an answer there, but particularly in relation to that first point about information on the website, obviously depending on the decision we take at the recommendations, Councillor Thompson's indicated maybe changing the last one to bring the procedure back. But of course, if we agree the policy today, subject to the recommendations, and then at a future meeting, and hopefully, as Alistair said, that work is quite well progressed, it might be sooner rather than later, then obviously those could be put up on the website as soon as members have taken a decision. Is that okay?
I think that's very helpful. Yes, I would also like to suggest that with respect to the acquisitions and disposal policy, whether there will be any consideration given to assets which have been disposed of, which actually turn out to have been in the common good, but have been disposed of. And I don't know whether this sort of policy would encompass an approach to that sort of matter.
Okay. Ronnie, your hand went up but came down. Are you wanting to come in?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen's took part at that point on the common goods. That's been answered. One of the things is, I mean, there has been a lot of members' concerns regarding some of the disposals and disposal policies that's been in place. And I can't actually see, it's probably hidden in wording and things like that, but I can't actually see that some of the most of the concerns have been dealt with. And I know that, policies should reflect best value and that must be demonstrated, but examples being that it should be no cost to the council or loss of revenue, to the council, because, some are being disposed of that have a revenue implication for the council, and that shouldn't be. So that kind of thing, unless it's got an overriding reason why it should be. Another part is that, when property is disposed of to the trust, for example, what guarantees is in there, or how can we stop that being used to provide an unfair advantage to other businesses? One, keeping the rent low, for example, a business that's been passed on to a trust that was being used by a business, and that is then used to cut the costs for that business as it's taken place at a detriment to other businesses.
Okay, Colin and/or Alistair.
I think, on you go, sir.
But it's a difficult one to answer in a way, but our sort of fundamental sort of policy in terms of disposing property is that they're placed on the open market for sale, and would be subject, if there's any sort of change of use involved, to.
Sorry, this was for a trust passed on, so it's not open market.
Are you talking about? Sorry, is it community asset transfers or?
Yeah, it was passed on, which a business was using, and then that business gets an unfair advantage for the rents for that business on behalf of the trust, to the detriment of other businesses that might be in the same business as the one that's there.
So it was in relation to a CAT transfer request. Colin, do you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When we look at every community asset transfer request, we have to look at not just the request, but the impact that request will have on the wider community at large. And we do take into consideration, for example, if we were to transfer an asset in the middle of town that they wanted to turn into a community cafe, what impact that would have on other cafes in the town. And if it didn't all add up to benefiting the community, then the recommendation to members would be not to agree that transfer.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I mean, that's partly answered it, but, you know, it's, I just feel that, you know, there probably are communities there, and they've got the best interests of the communities at heart, but whether they recognise that what they're doing is actually providing a better situation for one business over another, I don't know. Another one is, you know, that the point I mentioned about no cost to the council, if for example, loss of revenue, if we're doing that and it's having revenue implications for the council, then that surely isn't right.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. John Campbell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I welcome the update for the policy, and I suppose there's a number of legislations that kind of cross over in this policy. You know, you've got the Local Government Scotland Act, Disposal of Land by Local Authority regulations, and the Community Empowerment Act. So all these things have an effect, but one of the things that I did pick up on, and maybe just get a wee bit of clarification, was that best value, all disposals and acquisitions must achieve best value, which I kind of support anyway, because we should try and achieve best value. But I'm just wondering about the best value for the likes of CAT transfers. You know, it's not just monetary terms, there's a social value in that as well. I'm sure Colin's probably picked up on that and on a number of CAT transfers that have come to various committees. So just a wee bit of clarification on that, so that members of the public realise that it's not just a monetary value that we must achieve, there's also that social value as well. Thanks, Chair.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. I take on board the Councillor's point. What we do now with all community asset transfers is we assess the social value through the social value engine, but we also have a framework now where we assess all community asset transfers requests against the best value criteria, and we try and include that in, or we will include that in all future reports. I think going back to my previous point about making information available, again, I would maybe suggest that we, for the agreed policy, embed all hyperlinks to the likes of best value guidance, community asset transfer guidance, just so when we publish the document, the public can have access to all the relevant information.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Ivor?
It's just with regard to paragraph 5, the impact assessment. It says that does not propose a change, yet at paragraph 3.6.1 it says a summary of the proposed changes. Now, is impact assessment just there for major change in policy? Because I think we're sort of tweaking it rather than major change. So is that why it's not got an impact assessment?
Alistair? You're on mute.
Yeah, I would agree that what we're doing is sort of making sort of fairly minor tweaks to the policy as opposed to making anything fundamental that would actually trigger the need for an impact assessment.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I was coming in the back of Councillor Nicholson. I think he raised a valid point. We quite often get confronted from business owners where they say, okay, you've community asset transferred or disposed of your property for a low consideration, and listen, that's it, they've got a competitive edge in us. Now it's really about social enterprise versus private enterprise, I suppose, in real terms. But the comfort I got through what Colin had come back with in regards to that answer, and the point I was trying to just emphasise or tease out. So if we get a report and that was the situation, and there's a potential conflict, Colin, between social enterprise and private enterprise, then would we see that level of detail to say, okay, this is how we've evaluated that, this is what we've considered, and this is where we think that the conflict may be. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Again, going back to the community asset transfer process, if there was a request to come in, as the Councillor Crothers suggests or illustrates, we would be obliged to contact any interested parties, and that would include local businesses, those that might be affected by the proposal, and they would then be able to put forward representations in terms of what they felt about the proposal and how that would impact on their businesses, etc. And all that information would be brought back for members to consider.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Colin.
Henry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my point relates, I suppose, to acquisitions, and looking through the policy, and obviously the support and procedures will sit there in the background. I'm just wondering, where do we find any link to a possibility where we may or may not purchase derelict buildings and derelict properties? So I'm just wondering how that actually sits within the policy framework regarding acquisitions in inverted commas.
Alistair?
I think the policy around acquisition is really based on the fact that a service would need to recognise the requirement to acquire an asset, and would have to formulate a business case, which first of all would be put to the council's strategic asset board, just to sort of get the view of other sort of council officers that sit on that board, with a view to that business case then going to the relevant service committee. That's the acquisition policy, sort of in a nutshell. So if there was a proposal to acquire a derelict building, then there would have to be a business case made to actually support that proposal, which would then need to be agreed by elected members on the relevant committee.
Okay, Lorna.
Thank you, Chair. This point was discussed in some detail at the Employment Resources Committee on Tuesday, and the leaders were clear about the outstanding commitment to bring forward a policy on derelict land within the region, and how the council would play its part in supporting its regeneration. So that is now scheduled for consideration to this year by Employment Resources Committee, and mindful of the disposal and acquisitions policy and indeed updated procedures that would have to link with that. So to reassure members, that remains on the agenda, and there will be further consideration and reports back to members on this.
Okay, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to put a form of words in the chat just now, if that's helpful, as a suggested amendment, just in terms of like bringing a report back. So I'll just do that now. But it was just on the back of a couple of comments to do with the Common Good Register, and also just the idea this should be a rolling register, obviously. So, and I'm thinking about the contracts register as well, because obviously I'm not sure if a lease is the same as a contract, but I think it is in substance, effectively. But will leases become part of the contract register if we have a lease on a piece of land, or whether it's common good or council? If it's a long-term lease, then obviously we'd want to be able to have sight of that. So that's maybe something that will come out in the detail of the policy or the procedures that come back. And the second thing about the Common Good Register is that we know, I'm sure across all the different wards, we know that there are pieces of land in common good with which some parts of the council are having discussions or negotiations. However, those pieces of land, while the council, at least part of the council, knows them to be common good or surplus, the public doesn't. Now, I can't really, I think we're a wee bit back to front on that. So if there's a piece of land we know is common good, it should be already on the register. And there's no real reason that I can see why that shouldn't be, rather than having to wait for a comprehensive and whole council review. It should just be stuck on. If we can have a report at a common good subcommittee about a piece of land, it should already be on the public common good register on the website. I just don't understand why that can't be. So just on the back of Councillor Maitland's point, I think we need to be much more transparent and obvious about what's common good as soon as we know it's common good, and then that way there's no lack of transparency. But anyway, I've put a form of words in the chat function there, Chair. I don't know if it's of help or if members are happy with that sort of thing to go on with. Thank you.
That's useful. I'll come back to that in a second. You're the last person who's indicated they want to speak. Alistair, I'll bring you in on Stephen's point first.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're at the point. Yes, we can and will as soon as possible update the the common good asset register on the asset now through services to be common good. We're already in communication the web team on how to do that, so we're quite well advanced on that, and we are planning to do that very soon. And once that's published, we're actually considering having some sort of live link where when assets are any sort of further assets are recognised as being common good, that will then update sort of as soon as they're added on to our asset register as being common good.
Okay.
Well, thanks for that. Could I just ask about the contract situation, contracts and leases? Would that form part of a contract register?
I'm sorry, I'm actually not familiar with the contract register at all, so I don't know whether I can certainly look into that, but I'm not familiar with the contract register, so I'm not sure I can answer that question at this moment in time.
Okay, we'll get an answer back to you on that, Stephen. We'll just send it to all members of the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got no other members want to come in, so I'll move to the recommendations. And just of interest for anybody who may be watching this live, the amendment to the recommendations that Councillor Thompson has proposed is subject to 2.2. Agree that the detailed disposal and acquisition procedures that accompany the policy adopted by full council in 2017 will be updated to embed the policy statement, and the amended procedures will be brought back for committee consideration. So I will move to the recommendations. Are members happy to, first of all, note the outcomes of the engagement with political groups as appendix? Yep. Are we happy to, secondly, agree the updated disposal and acquisition policy as set out in Appendix 2?
Agreed.
And then are we happy to agree the form of words proposed by Councillor Thompson to bring back the updated procedures to a future meeting of this committee?
Agreed.
Yep. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 9, review of the internal financial procedures and procurement standing orders implementation plan update. This report presents the second update on the agreed implementation plan to address the recommendations from our review of internal financial procedures and procurement standing orders. There are other reports later in this agenda which report on specific actions from the review. Paul Garrett, Nick Evans, Mike Shepley and Lorna Meehan are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will now open it up to member debate. Is there any members who wish to come in on this item? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. It just says page 150 on it's the appendix. It's the only one I think it's unread really, but so there was a meeting yesterday afternoon with the group leaders in regards to the member officer working group with quite I would say a robust and lengthy debate in regards to this particular item. So I wonder if there's any update. Is that still read? How is it moving on? What are the timelines looking at that? And certainly one of the main things I focused on myself is that it should be customer-led stroke constituent stroke people from Dumfries and Galloway led when it comes to the culture, because that wasn't in the actual proposed remit at all. So, but look for an update if we can, and is it still unread? Thank you.
Okay, Ian, my understanding is that since that meeting took place yesterday, it has probably moved on. Obviously, this sort of captures as the reports were printed, which was a week or two ago, but I'll bring in Lorna Meehan on that point.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Obviously, the commitment that was made as part of a response to the recommendations was about delivering a programme of culture change activity, and following the decision at full council in March, following the agreement of the implementation plan, it was viewed as appropriate and indeed correct to take direction from that member officer working group. So since, as you mentioned, that the meeting took place yesterday afternoon, officers will be seeking detailed instruction and guidance in terms of the culture change programme as a result of that first meeting and indeed subsequent meetings. So we'll be able to update members in September following, and obviously take action in between.
Okay, are you okay? Happy with that, Ian?
I think Fiona's looking to add value to this conversation. Thanks, Chair.
Fiona, you wanting to come in on this point?
It was just if you required me to. I mean, clearly, well, first of all, good morning, Chair, and good morning, members. It was just if you required me to. I mean, clearly, as Councillor Carruthers has said, this member officer group only had its first meeting yesterday. We did, in fact, have a wide-ranging discussion. It was a very productive discussion, and I have committed to go back to the member officer group in 2 weeks' time, and I think we've actually set a date this morning for that. So proposals arising from that will go to that member officer working group, to whom the council has discharged this important piece of business, and members can expect to hear further in early course. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ivor?
Chair, I would give a comment. Is it all right, Chair? Just a quick comment.
Okay, that's fine.
So it was marked up as exempt, that paper yesterday, so I think it's important that all members see that paper, and obviously they see the full set of information in a couple of weeks' time as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ivor?
Chair, it was just to sort of say that the culture one will be one of the most difficult ones to measure and to see change in, because I think the baseline is important. I see that work starting. I would expect that it might be amber on the sheets for a while, but people will build through it. It'll not happen overnight, and we'll get a positive outcome, possibly maybe 6 to 8, 10 months down the line. It might be a year and a half, but we'll get there in the end. And it's just one of those things, it takes a wee while for people to change. So that culture will take a wee while, and look forward to seeing what comes out of the officer working member group that'll lead us on this direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can't take a decision to change the culture. We have to encourage it, we have to embed it, we have to embody it. And I would say that actually elected members have a huge role to play in that ourselves too, in encouraging, embedding and embodying that culture that we want to be displayed in this council. Fiona?
Well, first of all, thank you to yourself, Chair, and Councillor Hislop for those remarks. I think that is very important, and I think what I have noticed in the time that I've been here is the prevailing positive culture within this organisation, and we've seen the evidence of that culture and those values in the way that all of our teams have responded to to our communities at this time. The point I did want to make was just a minor point, and it was just in terms of Councillor Crothers's request. Anything coming from the member officer group to the wider members of the council will of course be a matter for the member officer group in the first instance, and it would be appropriate for me to be reporting back there in the first instance. It will be a decision for the member officer group when it is in a position to make its report to the council. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've got no other members wishing to come in on this point, so we'll move to the recommendations, and I think it's fair to say that we have reviewed the update on the implementation plan progress. Item number 10 is the council budget management structure. This report provides us with details of the council's updated budget management structure in line with the implementation plan to progress the recommendations arising from this committee's review of the financial procedures and procurement standing orders. Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross are here to assist us with any questions, and I will now open it up for member debate. Is there any points that members wish to make on this report? Nope. I will move to the recommendations then. Are we happy to note 1 and 2 and agree 3 and 4 on? Oh, sorry, Jock, I've just noticed your hand there.
Sorry, Chair, my hand wouldn't come up quick enough. I don't agree with what's proposed here at all, but I think for comfort, and albeit there's a change in council next year, I would suggest that a 3-year review be carried out, just to assess if the levels that are agreed, if we agree them today, if these levels need to be changed slightly maybe every 3 years. If we review it every 3 years, consideration can be made over the levels that each person's allowed to spend, and if it needs increased, it can be done through a committee meeting rather than people carrying on with a level of finance that's not suitable for their position.
Okay, Paul, do you want to comment on that review point?
Yes, no, I mean, I think probably more often than once every 3 years, Councillor McKee, for reviews is more appropriate. What we've said in this report is that now that there is this greater visibility for members in terms of the arrangements in place within the council for undertaking transactions, I think it's important that members maintain that visibility. So what we're planning to do is at least once a year to come back to members to refresh this position, and this will also be published on an ongoing basis attached to our financial codes. So I don't know if I picked up Councillor McKee correctly just at the start. I think he maybe indicated he maybe didn't agree with the paper. I just wondered if there's a particular concern in relation to it, because certainly the kind of general approach in the report has been to get a greater level of control on authorisation levels, and also to make sure that members are fully aware of those arrangements that are in operation across the council. So if there's any particular concerns, obviously happy to try and address those.
No, my issue was just the comfort for the members that if you think you need to review the figures that are proposed in the papers, if you think they need to be reviewed, then it should be reviewed. But if you think annually it would be better than 3 years, then I'm quite happy to go with that.
Right, thanks, Jock. Jane?
I may well be being dim over this, but I'm not absolutely clear from the report as to why we picked those particular numbers. And I think it would be helpful just to have a little bit of explanation as to why that. And also, in fact, actually, Adam, I think also to perhaps consider what are the risks of not doing this? I mean, I know it's part and parcel of the implementation plan. I understand that, but I think it might be helpful just to expand on it just a little bit.
Okay, Paul, are you happy to do that?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the actual values that we've set out in the report, and I think probably it's paragraph 315 that Councillor Maitland's mainly referring to there. What we've done is we've done a review, a detailed review of the kind of nature and level of transactions undertaken across the council, in the last couple of years to try and assess what kind of values. We've tried to minimise these values, and they're significantly reduced on what was previously in place, and I made reference to that. I think it's paragraph 316 there. But what we don't want to do is obviously impact in a detrimental way on the normal day-to-day business and the operation of the council's activities. So we've been set basically reflecting that balance, but just to give members assurance that there are actually reductions on what was previously there, particularly below the kind of heads of service level, because what we felt was that a number of authorisation levels were set to address a kind of a very rare occasion, the once a year potentially, that somebody has to do a higher value transaction, and what we feel is that's better actually undertaken through the escalation process, so it goes up to the heads of service or to their director. So we've tried to basically reduce the levels across the council in general. I think the second point of Councillor Maitland's question was in regard to if we don't do this. I would just say that this is really giving members visibility of what's happening across the council. If we didn't apply this, there would be much less control, I think, than this report would actually support. And we've discussed this in detail with individual directors and service management teams, and they're jointly of the view that this is helpful in terms of giving them greater visibility and control in terms of who's actually authorising and undertaking transactions on behalf of the council. So I think it's a positive step in that sense. But again, happy to answer any kind of further questions in relation to that.
Okay, are you happy with that, Jane?
I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm taking comfort from 319 in the report, just because obviously now that we've got this set out in front of us, and I'm sure it'll be tweaked and reviewed as time goes on, just to reflect, the nature of business and changes to financial levels, inflation, etc. But I think even just that kind of clarity over the level of training, because obviously it's the day-to-day business that has been in part the problem, because we weren't really sure how it was being monitored or what the compliance levels were. So, but however, we can't stop day-to-day business going on. But as Paul's saying, so I think, yeah, if we start to see either at service committees or at this committee or both, the percentage of people who've got the required mandatory training, and also that kind of monitoring over the performance around how the budgets are being used, then I think that will be many leaps forward from where we were, I think. So I think I welcome this in that report. And as I think the regular reviewing, I'm sure 3 years would be a minimum, but surely we would be seeing it back probably in the normal committee cycle, whether it's 6 monthly or annually, hopefully.
And of course, on one of our later items of business in reference to the finance procurement business plan, there is some KPIs being added in line with the FPT review. So hopefully that satisfies you as well, Stephen. Henry?
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Paul, it's just a query regarding control measures. I totally understand and appreciate the various thresholds when you're looking at the 10,000s, 20,000s, 100,000s. What controls do we have in place then to ensure that packages of work aren't split into like quantums that would allow an individual, for instance, to maybe raise or authorise 5 payments of less than £20,000 to have that's then got the potential, I could say, maybe to be a bit not in keeping with the system. So what controls have we got in place to prevent that and misuse of these thresholds?
Yeah, thanks. No, that's a useful question, because it is a kind of key issue that was taken into consideration in terms of the report and the levels that we've reflected in it. But I think that the kind of key thing to recognise here is that these arrangements set out in the report are part of an overall set of control and monitoring measures within the council. And obviously we have the kind of monitoring process that's undertaken through regular reporting to service committees on the budget monitoring position. So what we'll be doing on an ongoing basis is monitoring spend levels and transactions now, and the improvements in terms of the systems recently through the PEP project and others is giving us greater visibility of transactions across the council. We'll have that opportunity to continually review what transactions are being undertaken and look to identify any patterns of that nature. Hopefully that is not something that is happening or is likely to happen, and I think improving the kind of visibility of these arrangements will help ensure that that's the case, but it will be something we'll be taking into account as part of our ongoing monitoring activities.
Okay, I've got no further members wishing to come in, so I'll move to the recommendations. Are we happy to note 1 and 2 and agree 3 and 4 on block?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item number 11 is the Procurement Officers Group. We're provided with details on the operation of the Procurement Officers Group, which has been established in line with the implementation plan to progress the recommendations from the FPT review. Paul Garrett is here to assist members with any questions. Is there any questions from members on this? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. And if you don't mind, bear with me with this one. So it's no tenuous link, but it's certainly there, and I hope I explain this in the right manner for yourself, Paul. So I'm looking at our recommendations, and it tells us that we've been asked to note the establishment of the Procurement Officer Group, Officer Group, associated purposes, so on and so forth. But you'll remember probably quite clearly the Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee did a piece of work where they did a review on a scrutiny review on growing the local economy through the procurement process, and as part of that review, which was fully supported by the full council, so all members, as part of that, one of the stumbling blocks we came across was small to medium-sized enterprises found it difficult and complex trying to tender for, say, council, get through the council procurement process and council contracts. So I'm just wondering, what role does this Procurement Officer Group have in ensuring that those type of drivers or I suppose it's just helping and making it as easy as possible as we can for small, local and medium-sized enterprises that they can bid into this type of contract. What's your role in regards to this is probably what I'm trying to say, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, I think that particular point links in quite nicely to the kind of second bullet point at paragraph 3.6, where we've set out kind of the kind of key role of the group and review and progression of the procurement elements of the FPT committee implementation plan is a key part of that. And in that implementation plan, it was in the kind of previous report, there's a range of measures there that are aimed at improving our engagement with local suppliers and local businesses, and specifically trying to address those points in terms of encouraging and supporting local suppliers to compete for council work. I think I'm right in saying, I wasn't actually there myself, but I think I'm right in saying there was a kind of follow-up seminar in relation to these issues yesterday with members where those kind of issues were discussed in a bit more detail. And I know that the seminar we had a couple of weeks ago on the progression of the resourcing of the implementation plan, we talked about some of the new approaches we're taking to try and reach out to local suppliers. And I know it's a kind of small example, but one of the things that was kind of reflected in that seminar was kind of using Facebook to put things out there, but also looking at other means there as well. And one of the things we're trying to do, and there's in the following report in this agenda, we're talking about some of the kind of support arrangements we have in place for suppliers, and there's a kind of combination between, you know, the kind of virtual support and the kind of physical, direct, face-to-face support we can provide to suppliers going forward. So those are key elements of the improvement in our procurement activities across the council, and this group itself will have a kind of key role in overseeing and supporting that.
Okay, you happy with that, Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paul. No, I appreciate that. I'm unfortunate I missed that. It was a workshop. I missed that myself as well, Paul. So it's unfortunate. I know Councillor Maiden was here. She led in it, and I got some positive feedback from her yesterday. She maybe looked to add more comment, but it's something that certainly still gets brought up in regards to small to medium-sized enterprises, from sole traders up to, say, 10, 14 men. It is a complicated process, but ultimately we do want to make sure that every opportunity for local business to feed into that and get opportunities from it. Thank you.
Okay, Jane.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I see I left my thing open. Adam, yes, it was a very useful session yesterday, and I certainly gathered more from it. But what I wanted to ask on this particular issue was, it's about reassuring the public on non-specific issues. Now, you know, they come to both Ian and me and anybody else, all other members have had people approach and say the council's not being fair. And, you know, you've got a procurement officer group here, and I think it would be really useful to be even more open and transparent with the public so that they know that the how the council tackles particular problems that they think is going on. You know, I mean, look at the Henry's question last time round, which I thought was extremely useful about splitting contracts and therefore avoiding certain of the council's rules. You know, getting round the problems, evading the checks and balances that the council has put in place. And I think it would be really useful if the council was open enough to almost have a kind of forum to say that these are what we discussed in the last 6 months, these particular problems which have evolved, without being specific. You know, I mean, obviously you don't want to mention specific businesses, but it would, I think, calm fears that there is anything going on. And it comes back to the whole culture business. It's about being open, transparent, willing to say, yeah, this was wrong, or this we got wrong, and this is how we are tackling the particular problem. So I just would like to know whether we can look at the group being slightly more open to the public in terms of what they discuss and the risks that they then seek to mitigate.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think providing that kind of wider assurance on activities within the council is important. What we've said in the report is that we will report back to this committee on the activities of the group twice a year. So that will be obviously a public report. Some of this kind of specifics that Councillor Maitland was referring to there maybe haven't got the kind of the highest of profile in terms of the agenda and remit of the group at this stage. So I'm happy to take that on board and have a look at how we can maybe meet that requirement a bit more effectively, and maybe liaise with Councillor Maitland on kind of key measures that you'd like to see as part of that. So happy to kind of bring that in or beef that up as part of the work of the group going forward.
Okay. I've got no other members wishing to come in on this. Are we happy to note the establishment of the group?
Great.
Yep, excellent. Item number 12 is procurement and commissioning performance update for Q3 of the last financial year. This report provides an overview of the key procurement activity for Q3 of 2020-21. The report highlights key issues and activity during that period, including supplier engagement. Paul Garrett is here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open it up to member debate. Okay, since there's no members want to come in, I'll move to the recommendations. And are we happy to note the update? Oh, sorry, Ivor.
Sorry about that. It's just with this iPad. It takes me a wee while to get to the chat to put in speak to come back. Just a couple of points. On the KPIs, the one about paying the Scottish living wage, how far does that go down the contract process? So if we award a contract to a supplier and they then subcontract it out, do they still have to comply with that requirement? Or is it just the initial contract that we do? And the other one was with regard to the supplier development and engagement. It would appear that not many people are attending these. Is it because there are times that don't suit the public, or is it a case of because of the COVID, it's been a bad year to do these things?
Paul?
In terms of the first point, I mean, the stats in the report are based on the kind of main contractor rather than kind of any subcontracting arrangements in it. No, it's a voluntary issue, so it's not something we can actually require as part of the contracts. But again, we could maybe look to see what further information could be provided in terms of the payment of the living wage down the supplier chain, because obviously it's something we're looking to encourage across the board. In terms of the supplier development engagement processes. I mean, they're all low single figures, so we're very conscious that they're not being that well used or well attended in terms of those formal events. So we're liaising with colleagues in economic development about how we could maybe make sure we can make them more appealing and more helpful and more widely used across the kind of business communities. So I don't know if it's times issues or something along those lines, but again, key to trying to improve our support to the local businesses is trying to make sure that those events are as accessible and useful as possible. So again, we'll be looking at that further as we go forward.
Okay, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just in order to try and gain a better understanding of what's happening, looking at page 163, Paul, and there's a table there. The table provides details of regulated contracts awarded in the reporting period. So I'm just looking down the contracts. So most of them, they're figures that are multiple numbers. So they're not. There's only a couple that are rounded off. So I'll pick on one of them rather than the bus shelter contract. I'll leave that to the side. But a very round figure. Round figures usually tell you something. So I'll go to the second last one on that first table, and it's just about boiler servicing and maintenance, and it's £600,000 a company from out with the region. Any level of detail in regards to that procurement process it went through? I mean, the first thing that stands out, going back to the point I made earlier, I wonder why we didn't use somebody locally, a rather hefty contract, or was it because of the procurement process is prohibitive? Is it a specialist type of boiler servicing? Is it very large? Is it biomass? What is it? I just wondered if there's any detail in regards to that. Thank you, Chair.
Paul?
I could probably speak a wee bit more about the kind of financial or contractual side rather than specifics of the service, although happy to kind of liaise with the relevant service to get that information out to members. But in terms of the kind of numbers around that one, the 600,000 there is a 3-year total in terms of the estimated value of the contract across 3 years. And the other thing I'm conscious of in that one was that it actually reflected a saving against the previous level of spend of about £25,000 per annum. We're previously spending about 225,000 a year. We're now looking at 200,000 through this contract. So that's probably the details on the financial side. Apologies, I can't go into too much detail on the nature of the boilers and things like that. But again, happy to try and liaise with the relevant service and get that information out.
I'd be keen to hear that and see that, Chair, if that's okay.
What's that, sorry, Ian?
I'd be keen to see that level of detail. Just big round figures. I know when I never do quotations for the council. I've never done that ever. But if I'm quoting for particular jobs, it's a standard thing. You tend to use big round figures if you don't want the job. So I don't know. Maybe that's not the circumstance here at all. But I'd be interested to see what kind of procurement process. Was it competitive? Was there a number of companies? Is it a specialist? There's a level of detail I would like to see in regards to that particular contract, and it sets the scene for maybe other conversations we'll have later on as these reports come through. Thank you.
Okay, Ronnie.
No, I took my hand back down. It's just on the meetings with businesses and how the success or lack of success. I mean, this is not something new. It's been on for years. We used to have breakfast, evening, daytime meetings, and each had their own rate of success or lack of success within that. I mean, perhaps the businesses should be asked about whether more remote meetings might help, but that then excludes the informal chats as well. So each has their own pluses and minuses, but you're never going to get 100% anyway. So.
Yeah. Chair, if it's helpful, I've got access to the kind of the contract authorisation report for that boiler servicing and maintenance, so I can add a wee bit of information if that helps, and particularly in terms of the process. So it did go through a competitive process with a full contract strategy and then authorisation report before it was signed off. It was the kind of the service is boiler servicing and maintenance on a measured term contract over a period of 3 years, which equates to two years initially with an option of a 12-year extension at the sole discretion of the council. It was broken down into 4 different lots. There were 23 suppliers who registered an interest, but only 4 submitted bids. So those 4 were subject to a detailed assessment and scoring system before we identify the final appointment through the contract. So that's maybe a wee bit further information in terms of the approach, maybe a bit of assurance in terms of the competitive approach that was undertaken.
Okay, thank you. I've got no other members wishing to come in, so I'll move to the recommendations. Are we happy to note the update?
Noted.
Item number 13 is a standard report, implementation of Financial Code 11 debt write-offs. This report is brought forward to provide details of debt written off under delegated procedures over the 6-month period to the 31st of March 2021 for member scrutiny. Lindsay Wilson and Paul Garrett are here to assist if members have any questions. Do any members have any questions at this point? Nope. Okay, are we happy to agree to recommendations 1 and 2 in block?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item number 14 is the Finance Procurement Business Plan, refresh and summary. This report presents the refresh of the Finance Procurement Service Business Plan, taking account of the impact of the pandemic and the impact that it's had on the service. This is in line with the requirements of all services to present this refresh of the current cycle of committees. Paul Garrett's here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open up to member debate. Any members wishing to come in? Nope. I will move on to the recommendations then. Oh, sorry, Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. It takes me ages to type in the thing. I was going to speak in the last thing, but I'm fiddling around with an iPad and the phone. It's a bit of a struggle at times. It was really with replacing the indicators. It's related to the last subject because it's the stuff to do with local SME expenditure. And I kind of understand what we're saying, but a bit of information on what the new kind of metrics are going to be. Because if we start measuring it by percentage of spend, small companies, rather than number of contracts, small companies tend to go for smaller contracts. So the spend's going to be different. Just an indication. I get it why you want to change it, and it's fine, but a bit of an indication of what the potential new target and metrics going to be for measuring it.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, no, important points here. I think we recognise that with small businesses, it's not necessarily the value they spend that is the most important measure. So that's why the number of local suppliers applying to tender for council contracts continues to be a kind of key indicator for us, and is reflected in the plan going forward. So we see that alongside that kind of percentage of procurement spend with local suppliers has been a key measures of how we are supporting local businesses in an appropriate manner. I think I'm right in saying that slightly further on, yeah, on page 190 of the paper, the kind of updated targets for the refreshed business plan are reflected there. The target for number of local suppliers applying is 200. That was the target we had for the last financial year, but obviously that was affected by COVID and the kind of delays as a result of that in terms of issues going out to tender. So we've returned to that kind of higher target for the new year. And for percentage of contract spend, a lot of suppliers we've targeted 34% there. 32% was the target last year, so it's an increase on that. We'll have had periods where we've actually exceeded the 34%, but it's fairly volatile. So what we feel is 34% is the appropriate measure or target at the minute, but we'll monitor that. The idea would be ideally to see that increase in the future, and we'll assess the extent to which that can be achieved.
Okay.
So are these targets, are they kind of based on past performance, Paul, predominantly, or are they refreshed on a kind of zero-based basis?
They do take into account past performance, and it is a significant influence. What we've tried to do is build on performance, see a kind of gradual improvement or increase in these. So the idea would be last year we were well below the 200 for local suppliers applying, but that was partly due to COVID. So we're hoping that 200 is a realistic estimate for the new year. And on the second one, Malcolm, we've gone for a 2% increase on previous performance or previous target levels. So I think that what we're trying to do is kind of demonstrate or actually achieve continuous improvement and demonstrate that through our targets. So that's what we're trying to do in terms of these.
Okay, Jane.
Paul, I think looking at this, I think I've got in the back of my mind that you have 99 staff or positions. I'm not sure whether it's staff or positions, but it's roughly that. And I'm looking at the workforce and resourcing on page 188. And if I was to challenge you, I would say, how do I know whether you actually do have what is described as limited resource? I don't know whether we benchmark against other authorities or how I would know whether actually I'm applying, a thick wad of butter or a thin spread of butter with respect to financial resources. So I wonder if you could help me with that.
Paul?
Yeah, no, kind of probably two sides to the response there. One, there is national assessments done of relative size of finance, particularly finance, but finance procurement services. We are below the average, significantly below in procurement, but below in finance as well, in terms of the level of resource available to us. But that's we understand that, and that's our arrangements are in place to kind of help address it. So we're not making a big issue of lack of resources. I think we've got the resources we need to provide an effective service to the council, and fully aware that that could be improved in a number of areas with improvements in our service and improved resourcing. But I'm not making a big issue of that lack of resources. It's not something I feel as though I need to come back to members requesting more, although obviously members are aware that through the FPT review in terms of the procurement side, we have sought and members have agreed additional resources on a temporary period to support that improvement programme. So no, there certainly is limited resources. It's below the kind of national averages, but it's not something I feel is a major risk or concern for the council at this stage that I need to come back and engage with members further on.
Okay, Ivor.
Thank you.
Chair, it's on the sort of workforce information we've got. There's a statement here that a significant amount of our workforce are 45 and older. Now, 45 to 65 is 20 years, and within that there's 50 members of staff. The two groups below take in the same 20 years, 20 up, 20 down, and they're at 47. So we're not far off 50% above and below 45. So is that of concern, or should it just be that that's natural that you would see people moving through at that sort of rate?
I don't feel it's a major concern. We have done quite a lot in recent years to grow our own, in terms of kind of new managers and new officers coming through it. Basically, we've looked to recruit not externally, but through training and providing development opportunities for our own staff. So we're seeing younger staff coming through. So I think we're in a better position as we maybe were 5 years ago. It's something that we'll need to continue to monitor, but I don't see that as a kind of a really significant risk. We've not got a large number of employees that I feel are kind of close to that kind of retirement type age. So it's something we'll monitor, but not a major concern, I don't think.
Okay. I have got no other members wishing to come in, so I'll move the recommendations. Are we happy to note recommendation 1 and agree 2 and 3 on block?
Great.
Thank you. Item number 15 is the Finance Procurement Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2020-21. This report provides members with an overview of performance against budget at the end of financial year 2020-2021 for the finance procurement services and reflecting the context of the COVID-19 pandemic response. Gillian Ross and Paul Garrett are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open up to member debate. Don't think any members will want to come in on this item. I will move to the recommendations. Are we happy to note 1 and 2 in block? Okay. Item number 16 is the COVID impact on revenue and benefits service and a request for funding. We are presenting with a request from Neighbourhood Services Financial Wellbeing Revenues for the allocation of non-recurring funding required to ensure these services can continue to meet additional demands as a result of the pandemic and improve ongoing resilience of the service to meet anticipated future demands. Demand and resource allocations has been presented to the Communities Committee on a regular basis. If timescales had permitted, consistent with the scheme of delegations, this specific request would have been considered by that committee first, with the recommendations subsequently submitted to this committee. Given the circumstances, however, it is recommended that the budget detailed is approved by this committee, subject to Communities Committee agreeing the detail and performance monitoring arrangements of this resource. Lorna Campbell and Harry Hay are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open up to member debate. Ivor.
Chair, if this comes out the wrong way, I'm sorry, but this is a sort of catch-up because of the amount of work that's actually been put towards revenue and benefits, and we're putting some resource in to actually get us to a level where they've caught up in the work that's, exceptional amount of work they've had to do. Now, this is based on the fact that COVID will go away quickly, or at the end of this, and that money will be there. Will the team have the opportunity to come back if needed, if that workload either increases again or is maintained at the level that they're currently experiencing?
Who wants to answer that one? Harry?
Chair, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a good question, Councillor Hislop, and the answer is, I guess, that it's certainly a service that on an ongoing basis monitors demand, impact and resource allocation, and has got a very good track record of internally to that service moving resource about as required, and as the Chair mentioned, we report to Communities Committee on an ongoing basis with all of that. So you're right, some of this additional resource is to deal with a bit of a backlog, as you refer to it, but it's also to deal with some short-term pressures that are coming over the horizon that will have a very clear start, middle and end. But should we get to the position where we feel we can justify further resource, because it's important to stress to members, this is a non-recurring one-off sum at this moment in time, so there's no commitment beyond this. We would certainly want to ensure that that full cost-benefit analysis is brought back to members. I guess as members fully are aware, these services deal with some of the most vulnerable, and it's about ensuring that the services we provide are as responsive as possible and get for example, some of the one-off payments that is detailed in the appendix out to these members of the region as quickly as possible. Hopefully that reassures and answers the question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Harry. Jock?
Thanks, Chair. I'm quite concerned at the wording here. You're talking about 7 full-time equivalent posts. After a year, what happens to these posts?
Harry?
Chair, we'll ensure that the Council's agreed HR policies are absolutely followed. Obviously, in terms of a recruitment perspective, if staff are applying for these posts, they will go into it with their eyes fully open that it's a fixed term contract, and they'll know that they're applying on that basis. So it will certainly ensure that nobody is disadvantaged, and I can absolutely assure members that the relevant HR policy will be absolutely applied to the letter. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got no other members wishing to come in, so I will move to the recommendations. I think it's fair to say we have considered the impact of COVID-19 on the Revenue and Benefits Service. Sorry, I just see Stephen Thompson wants to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and apologies for, I was going to say, if we could get an extra 10 seconds to type speak, please, for us old timers before you got the recommendations, but I appreciate that. Thanks for letting me in. It was just on, obviously, there's papers coming up just to do with social work services, and, you know, we went to the, we felt it was best to just follow the right processes to sort of call an extra meeting in order to make sure that Social Work Services Committee could sort of get to some of the details behind the papers before bringing them here to make the recommendation and really sort of get that detail in that order, if you see what I mean. There's no doubt, obviously, that the paper in front of us is of key importance, and it's dealing with vulnerable people for a service that's under a lot of pressure, which I fully accept. I'm just sort of, you know, it's that, I suppose I'm looking for a bit of consistency, really, because, you know, and I appreciate that sometimes difficult. So is that something that we're going to streamline maybe as we go forward? Because I think, you know, for each service committee to be able to do that, it would certainly send out the fact that we're trying to do business as correctly as possible, and as consistently as possible. So it's just really a comment, really. But
yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. At the establishment of the FPT committee 2-3 years ago, I've lost track. We did some work on making sure that we had a more streamlined process and a clear process for you know, these types of funding requests. You know, a year or two ago, we had a number going to full council, a number coming here, and that wasn't consistent at all. I think that this is you know, complete extraordinary circumstances and is a one-off. I'm happy for somebody from governance, or I don't know if the director of communities is on the call, but you know, obviously there would be an option for communities to have an extraordinary meeting, but the decision was taken to go through this route for whatever reason. But I think, you know, we have done quite a lot of work to try and streamline and make sure that is that sort of single process. But of course, there's always extraordinary circumstances that arise, and we are indeed in one of those extraordinary circumstances. Any others wishing to come in?
No, I was going to say thanks for that, Chair. And if there is a word from governance, that'd be really helpful just to hear it from the professionals, as it were. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm presuming you're not accusing me of not being a professional, but Nick, do you want to come in on this point?
I think you've covered it quite fully there, Chair, to be honest. Yes, I think circumstances have dictated that this has been the route that it's been brought through to bring it to a conclusion as rapidly as possible.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll move on to the recommendations. I think it's fair to say we've considered the impact. And are we happy to agree recommendation 2 to approve £175,000 of non-recurring funding?
Agreed.
Excellent, thank you very much. Item number 17, as I indicated at the start of the meeting, I do have an item of urgent business, the paper for which was circulated to members last week, and that is a request for additional resources. This report seeks our approval to the commitment of non-recurring COVID-19 expenditure to support social work services to meet ongoing demand as a consequence of the pandemic. 3 reports in relation to this were considered at Social Work Services Committee on the 7th of June 2021, who agreed to these requests and that they should be presented to this committee. I've got an update to say that Social Work Services Committee indicated that their preference was that this funding should be allocated over an 18-month period, and the recommendations here today are asking us to approve that funding for an 18-month period. Lillian Kringles is here to assist members with any questions, and I will open up to member debate. Any members wishing to come in? Ivor?
Chair, I've maybe missed it in the last one. It's the Grow Your Own programme. Now, for a number of years, we've been doing a sort of Grow Your Own, and from what I read in the paper, it was quite successful. I think the numbers were, was it 6 of them have actually left the region, but the rest have stayed in the region. Now, should we not have that embedded in the social work budget rather than them having to come again and ask for additional, or is this additional funding over and above what we've done in the past? You know, is there something in there to make sure that we have a stream of good quality social workers or mental health officers coming through? You know, that should be something I would have thought that the social work service plan would have in place, and it's maybe looking to add weight to the recommendations rather than take away from it. But it's something I would have thought it's been quite important, and we've seen it over a period of time that we're always sort of chasing 2 or 3 good social workers because of the numbers that are in the region. And it seems to be, if you create some here, somebody will maybe poach 1 or 2 of them, and then you're in a bidding war to actually get them back. So is there something in there that we could actually extend that, or is this the start of that programme to actually look at a more regular programme of social workers being trained up to come into the service?
Lillian?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hislop, and thank you, members, for taking this late submission. We appreciate that from Social Work and from the committee. The circumstances, Councillor Hislop, is that our Grow Your Own scheme has been hugely successful over a significant period of time, which hopefully we have reflected. However, it's one of the areas that, you know, over the past 6 years we have had to cut back on, as, you know, pre-COVID there was some you know, savings to be made within the service, and that was an area that we had to reduce the number of social workers that we allowed to go forward to fulfil the Grow Your Own scheme. However, what has come to a head throughout the COVID pandemic, and actually a wider national issue, is there is a shortage of social workers. We have a real challenge in the region in terms of recruitment and retention of social workers. And what we know moving forward is that this is an area that we will continue to find challenging in meeting the demand for social workers coming to work within Dumfries and Galloway. So this is the beginning of a process. I can absolutely assure members that we are looking at every way to, if we are successful today in this additional support, over the next 12 to 18 months, we will be looking to see how we can look at reconfiguring some of our current substantive resource to make sure that we continue to meet that demand, because we are crystal clear that the only way that we will continue to meet the demand of social work services and have the social workers in post that will allow us to do that is by using the Grow Your Own scheme, and trying to meet the challenge of folks not, for whatever reason, and there are varied reasons that we struggle with recruitment and retention, and some of that is also being addressed. So there's some ongoing work being done just now around our gradings and around the salary that we currently pay to social workers, and certainly Social Work Committee are looking at different ways in which they can support that. So we are looking at different avenues to try and continue to have a stream of social workers coming to work in the region, but there is no doubt at all that this is a scheme that's been hugely successful, and we wish to grow on that. Heather, who leads on the scheme, is also on the call, but I hope that answers your question, Councillor Hislop, and certainly happy to come back. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. You happy with that, Ivor?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a risk when you carry out this type of scheme, but you would hope that actually, you know, if we get it right in making our council and our region an attractive place to work, that actually at some point these people will come back, and quite possibly as future managers, or after they've maybe done some additional CPD and bring back that expertise to the region. I have Jane Maitland.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I would simply like to say that I think that we should agree this proposal. It's always difficult when you're looking at extending your resources and you want to challenge about whether this is going to be a good thing to do. But I have looked at the single access point issue, and I really do think that we've got an opportunity here to make major changes in terms of the services that we provide through health and social care. And there are huge changes coming afoot. We're going to have to, I think, step up to the mark. And I'm not talking simply about the FELIA report. I'm talking about the advances that we are making through health and social care coming together. I'd just like to say that I would prod Lillian at this stage into the promotion of sharing of data and professional activities in the single access point. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. You told us about it in committee, and thank you for that clear explanation. And I'm very happy to support this. We also heard yesterday at the workshop about the advances that have been made in data sharing, and it's at this particular place that we can really make major steps forward if everybody pulls together in the same way. So I think I'm saying that I will be looking for that to be happening on the back of this extra resource going in.
Okay, thank you, Lillian. Is there anything you want to come back on there?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Maitland, and I can certainly assure you that we are looking to improve and increase the amount of data that is shared with members to give them assurance as we move forward. So happy to take that action. Thank you. Okay, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair, and Councillor Maitland's just basically stole my thunder there, such as it was, but it was actually on the back of yesterday's audit risk and scrutiny workshop, as Councillor Maitland touched on. It's clear that there are great rewards to be had, I think, in terms of how the systems are linking together on a technical level, just between the NHS systems and Mosaic, which I know there's a piece of work ongoing that we heard about yesterday, which should bring about great improvements to how we can work together as a partnership, and that's of course part of the landscape that we're in now more than ever. So very happy to support this, and obviously as is captured at the start, the Social Work Committee was quite clear that even though the recommendations talked about the 12 or 18 month period, the preference of the committee was clearly for the 18-month period as set out in the report, and I'm just happy to endorse this, and hopefully the committee will support that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I'm probably going back to the point where Ivor was picking up on a particular grow your own. So he said, should this be really embedded, is what I took from what he said, as a policy. So I'm interested, Lillian, in regards to how do we see that manifesting from this committee? Can we see that? So rather than coming cap in hand on an annual every couple of years or every 18 months, whatever it may be, say, listen, we need more money, we're under pressure for this type of succession planning. How do we embed that in policy? And the kind of wider aspects in regards to the health and social care partnership. So the council's one thing. I kind of flick my IGB hat just for a minute, but the NHS is another, and our wider partners. I just wonder what view or even level of consultation did the health and social care partnership have in regards to this paper coming forward, if they had any at all, that is. But I would imagine there'd be some conversations there, and they're the same kind of pressures across the other partners.
Lillian.
Thank you, Councillor Crothers. Thank you, Chair. Can I just take the first point for you, Councillor Crothers, and then I would ask Heather to come in around the consultation of the single access point and the health and social care partnership. So in terms of the Grow Your Own scheme, we absolutely know that this is the way that we would wish to move forward, and we will as a service be looking at our resources overall. As we move forward, we're currently facing a huge demand for our service, which I hope members can kind of see through the reporting and the information that we've provided. So what we are looking at is a period of 12 to 18 months to continue the response, to look at the recovery, to actually have an opportunity to analyse what the continued demand will be for social work services. And as we go through that process, and we are looking at our resource overall, and it may be in the future that we will be coming back to members to put forward what we feel are the risk areas, and undoubtedly the recruitment and retention of workers would be part of that. But what we are very clear of at this moment in time is that we need to do everything that we can. We need to grow the use of technology. We need to look at all the services that we have reconfigured throughout COVID, how we will continue to use some of that, learning from that opportunity to see where we will be effectively 18 months to 2 years from now. So there is no doubt that we would welcome an investment in our Grow Your Own scheme on a longer term basis. But what we need to do just now is have a period of stability, have a look at our resources overall, do an ongoing reshape, reconfiguration, whichever terminology we will look to use to prioritise the services as we move forward. We do believe that if we have this continued demand, and we don't know, I think that's the bottom line just now for us. We're in a situation where we've got a huge percentage increase. We are hoping that that will start to pull back as we come out of COVID, as we build on the human resilience and as our families start to bring in their own security and resilience around what they've had to face. But at this moment in time, the unknown is the challenging element for us. So we're looking for a period of support, and throughout that period of support, we will absolutely be looking at the longer term situation and demand for our services moving forward. And within that will be the Grow Your Own scheme. If you're happy with that, Councillor Crothers, I'd then ask Heather just to come in on the ongoing conversation around health and social care and the single access point. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Heather.
Happy with
that. Thanks, Chair. In terms of the single access point, we're really clear that single access point was developed from both delegated and non-delegated services. And so we've taken that approach around how we ensure then that we have that full overview of both. And therefore the partnership has been absolutely critical to this. So the single access point is one of the tactical priorities for the partnership. And I'm leading on that at the minute for them. And that is about ensuring then that what we do is we look at how we bring in more of the health aspects that could benefit from that sort of front door single point of access approach. And we set it alongside those non-delegated services and how we then run a whole approach to this, really. So what we're seeing very much in terms of if the 18 months was agreed, we would use that 18 months to then certainly talk to the partnership. That's one of the core tasks we would have around looking at, okay, what would be the future of this service going forward beyond that 18-month period, and how then might we then look certainly at how we share across some of that responsibility in terms of financially and just being generally resourced. And we would want to look at that. That would give us the time to do much more work around our projected figures, around what we think things will even down to. I think we've seen a spike clearly through COVID. We think it's coming down a bit. We don't expect it to come back to pre-COVID levels. And therefore we need to have a sense of what that new sort of projection looks like. And we expect that quite a lot of that will be in relation to some of the delegated services. So therefore sitting within the partnership, and that will allow us then to reshape in that sense what we would be asking for and what then the level of commitment from the council would continue to be, as opposed to then what the other commitment would be coming in from the partnership itself in terms of some of the additional health aspects. So that's, as I say, that's probably sort of top of our list around some of those negotiations about how we then seek to sort of get some permanency around what this might happen, and take into account at the same time, of course, will be all of the other changes that will be happening. So we know we're not going to do this in isolation. We'll have to see what comes with Feely, etc. So we will use those 18 months in that sort of very sort of like practical way in order to sort of really get underneath that and try and come up with a longer term solution that allows us to support and secure this as an approach going forward.
Okay, Fiona.
Thanks very much, Chair, and just really in supplement to what's been said already. I mean, I think this series of papers from Lillian and Heather, and this week's or last week's Social Work Committee, and the paper that you've just considered in respect of communities, these papers are about the here and now. But, you know, I would want to assure committee this morning that myself and Paul have actually had long meetings with colleagues to make sure that in funding these areas, then one, we're not creating legacy problems down the road, because you can only spend balances and non-recurring once. And the second thing is that we try to fund the change we want to see. And I think, all three of these papers are very exciting and offer real opportunities in this regard. They are properly, in terms of the longer term, the business of the forthcoming budget process, and we'll be making sure that is built into our considerations and available resource discussions. I think the wider discussion round about, a single point of access and sharing data across the council and people only having to contact us once. These are the very issues that we're considering just now in the council's digital strategy, which is in draft form. We'll be spending time on this next week, and members can expect to see something back at the appropriate committee on that wider council access to services after the summer recess. Hope that's helpful.
Okay, Jock.
Aye, thanks, Chair. I hope Lillian switched her earphones off. Grow Your Own was set up a number of years ago, Ivor, and the good thing about it at that time was there was employees working in offices, maybe just temping and that sort of thing, typing, and they were keen to become social workers, and they were told about the Grow Your Own project, and a number of them went through it, and they qualified as full-time social workers, and they were absolutely delighted that they got that chance to do it. And I would hope that the similar sort of thing happens this time. But no doubt you'd hear that during the COVID, a number of people from different departments went to social work and worked with social workers during the time when there was as much work to do. And those people actually enjoyed working with the social workers, and hopefully a number of them may apply to go through the Grow Your Own process, and it gives them the chance to develop their careers within their community, so they don't need to leave the area to improve themselves. So I would hope that a number of them that said they liked working with social work continue to do so and go for the Grow Your Own project, and if they're appropriate, they'll get selected. But I think it's an excellent project, and that we definitely need to support it without a doubt.
Okay, thanks, Jock. I've got no other members who want to come in, so I will move to the recommendations. Are we happy to agree to recommendations 1 to 4 in block?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item number 18 is Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do we agree to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4 and paragraph 6 of part 1 of schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Bearing in mind some comments earlier on, I will now adjourn for 5 minutes to allow members plenty of time to move over to the exempt item Teams meeting. So I will adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes and will reconvene